The wind howled through the pines lining County Road 12, a lonely stretch of gravel cutting through the Tennessee hills. It was near midnight when Jake Mercer pulled his pickup to the shoulder, the engine ticking as it cooled. He'd been driving back from a late shift at the sawmill, the kind that left his hands raw and his mind numb, when he saw it, a shape at the crossroads ahead where 12 met Old Hollow Road. Not a deer, not a coyote, but something bigger, darker, crouched in the moon's pale glow. He rubbed his eyes, chalking it up to fatigue, but when he looked again, it was still there. A massive hound, black as coal, its fur swallowing the light. It sat dead center where the roads crossed, unmoving, its head turned toward him. Jake's breath caught as twin embers flared in its sockets. Eyes like molten iron, promising something he couldn't name but felt deep in his bones. Doom, his grandma would have called it, her old stories of the black dog flickering through his mind. He'd grown up on those tales, how the hound appeared at midnight, a harbinger of death, its gaze a curse no one outran. Kids in Willow Bend laughed it off, but Grandma swore she'd seen it once, the night her brother drowned in the creek. Jake had rolled his eyes then, a cocky teen. Now, at 32, staring at this beast, he wasn't so sure. The air grew heavy, the wind dying to a whisper, and the dog just watched, silent, unblinking. He reached for his phone, fumbling to snap a picture, but the screen froze, then died, battery drained in seconds. "Damn it," he muttered, tossing it onto the seat. The hound shifted, its head tilting, and a low growl rumbled through the night, vibrating in his chest. Jake's hand hovered over the ignition, instinct screaming to drive, but curiosity, or stupidity, kept him rooted. He rolled down the window, the chill biting his skin, and leaned out. "What the hell are you?" he called, voice cracking. The dog didn't move, but its eyes burned brighter, searing into him. A wave of dread washed over, sharp and cold, visions of twisted metal, blood on asphalt, his own truck mangled. He blinked and the images vanished, leaving his heart pounding. Just a dog, he told himself, slamming the window up. He turned the key, the engine roaring to life, and floored it, gravel spitting as he sped past the crossroads. In the rearview, the hound stayed put, a black statue under the moon. Back home, a sagging trailer on the edge of town, Jake locked the door, his hands shaking as he poured a shot of bourbon. The clock read 12:17 a.m. He'd lost time, somehow those few minutes at the crossroads stretching longer than they should have. He downed the drink, the burn steadying him, and checked his phone, still dead, even plugged in. The hound's eyes haunted him, glowing in his mind, and sleep wouldn't come. Next morning, bleary-eyed, he drove to the diner for coffee, the town buzzing with its usual hum. Old man Tucker sat at the counter, nursing a mug, and Jake slid in beside him. "Ever hear of the black dog?" he asked, casual but tense. Tucker's roomy eyes flicked up, sharp for a moment. "Crossroads mutt?" "Yeah. Grandma's tale's a death shadow, they say. You see it?" Jake hesitated, then nodded. "Last night. Big bastard, eyes like fire." Tucker set his mug down, slow and deliberate. "Folks who see it don't last long round here. My cousin did, back in 72. Dead in a week, tractor flipped." Jake forced a laugh, but it died in his throat. "Just a stray," he said, more to himself. Tucker shrugged, unconvinced, and went back to his coffee. The waitress, Ellie, refilled Jake's cup, overhearing. "My pa saw it too," she said, quiet. "Night before the mill fire. Lost 3 men." Jake's grip tightened on the mug. 3 accounts, Grandma, Tucker, Ellie's pa, all tied to death. He paid and left, the hound's gaze clawing at his thoughts. At the sawmill, he worked distracted, the whine of blades too close to that growl. On break, he called his sister, Lila, in Knoxville, needing a skeptic's voice. "Black dog?" she laughed. "You're spooked by a fairy tale? Get some sleep, Jake." But her tone faltered when he described the eyes, the dread. "Be careful," she added, softer. That night, he avoided County Road 12, taking the long way home through town. The clock struck midnight as he parked, and a chill hit him. There, by his mailbox, sat the hound, massive and still, its ember eyes locked on his trailer. He froze, keys slipping from his hand. It hadn't followed the road, it was here, waiting. The growl came again, low and deep, and the air thickened with that same doomed weight. Jake bolted inside, slamming the door, heart racing. Whatever it wasn't done with him yet. Jake's trailer felt like a cage, the thin walls no match for the weight of the black dog's gaze outside. He pressed his back to the door, breath shallow, the growl still echoing in his ears. Through the grimy window, he saw it massive, motionless, its ember eyes boring into the trailer, unblinking in the midnight dark. The clock ticked past 12:01 a.m., each second stretching thin, and his phone, dead since last night, refused to charge. He fumbled for the bourbon, spilling half the shot, and downed it, the burn a frail shield against the dread coiling in his gut. He'd taken the long way home, avoided the crossroads, yet here it was, squatting by his mailbox like it owned the place. Grandma's stories spun through his mind, how the hound marked you, how its eyes promised an end you couldn't dodge. Tucker's cousin, Ellie's pa, all dead after seeing it. Jake wasn't one for superstition, but this wasn't a stray mutt. It was something older, something that bent time and space to find him. He grabbed his hunting rifle from the closet, a .30-06 he'd used for deer, and cracked the window an inch. "Get out of here," he shouted, voice hoarse. The dog didn't flinch, its growl deepening, vibrating through the floorboards. He aimed, finger trembling on the trigger, but those eyes, glowing, endless, stopped him. A flash hit him, his trailer ablaze, smoke choking his lungs, flames licking his skin. He gasped, dropping the rifle, the vision gone as fast as it came. The hound tilted its head, almost amused, then stood, pacing a slow circle around the trailer before vanishing into the pines. Jake didn't sleep, the rifle across his lap, ears straining for that growl. Dawn broke gray and cold, and he stumbled outside, shotgun in hand. No tracks, no fur, just a scorch mark by the mailbox, black and jagged, like something had burned the gravel itself. He touched it, the heat faint but real, and yanked his hand back. "What the hell?" he muttered, the bourbon sour in his throat. He needed answers, not folklore. At the diner, Ellie poured his coffee, her eyes wary. "You look like death," she said, lingering. Jake rubbed his face, the stubble rough. "It was at my place last night. By the mailbox. Watched me till I thought I'd lose it." Her hand faltered, coffee sloshing. "Jesus, Jake?" Pa said it followed him 2-3 nights, then the fire. "You gotta do something." He leaned closer, voice low. "Like what? Shoot it? Pray? It's not a damn dog." She glanced around, then slid a napkin over, scribbling fast. "Miss Clara lives out by the hollow. Knows the old ways." Pa went to her, said she helped. Jake took the napkin, "Clara Boone, Hollow Road," and nodded, skeptical but desperate. "Thanks, Ellie. Keep this quiet." She agreed, her face tight with worry. He drove to Hollow Road, a dirt track twisting through the hills, the pines closing in. Clara's shack was a lean-to of weathered boards and tin, smoke curling from a chimney. She answered his knock, bent, white-haired, her eyes sharp as flint behind wrinkled skin. "Saw you coming," she rasped, waving him in. The air inside was thick with herbs and candle wax, a shotgun propped by the door. "Black dog's got you, huh?" Jake sat, the napkin crumpled in his hand. "Twice now Crossroads, then my place. Eyes like fire, makes me see things, bad things." Clara nodded, poking a fire in the hearth. "It's a fetch boy. Old spirit, tied to the Crossroads. Marks folks for death, feeds on the fear. Been here since the hills were young." He frowned uneasy. "Why me?" She shrugged, tossing herbs into the flames, their scent sharp. "Could be chance. Could be blood, your kin cross it before?" He thought of Grandma's brother, drowned decades back. "Maybe. Grandma saw it once." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Then it knows you're lying. Won't stop till it claims you or you claim it." She handed him a pouch, dried leaves, a stone etched with a cross. "Bury this at the Crossroads, midnight. Salt your doors. Might break the mark. Might not." Back home, he salted the trailer's threshold, the pouch heavy in his pocket. Work dragged, the sawmill's noise a dull roar, his coworkers' chatter fading to static. On break, he called Lila again, her voice a lifeline. "You're losing it, Jake," she said, half laughing. "A dog? Come stay with me, get out of that backwater." He wanted to, but the hound's eyes pinned him here. "Soon," he lied, hanging up. Midnight loomed, and he drove to the Crossroads, the pouch sweaty in his grip. The air thickened as he stepped out, salt crunching under his boots. No hound yet, just silence, the moon a sliver overhead. He dug with a pocket knife, burying the pouch deep, whispering Clara's words, "Leave me be, spirit." The ground trembled, a low growl rising, and he spun. The black dog stood there, closer than before, its eyes blazing, promising ruin. Jake stumbled back, salt spilling, and ran for the truck, the growl chasing him home. The truck's engine roared as Jake sped from the Crossroads, the black dog's growl fading into the night, but not the dread. The pouch was buried, Clara's ritual done, yet those ember eyes lingered in his rear view, a promise unbroken. He fishtailed onto his trailer's lot, gravel flying, and stumbled inside, slamming the door. Salt lined the threshold, a thin white barrier, but the air felt heavy, the silence too deep. He checked the clock, 12:14 a.m., and grabbed the rifle, its weight a flimsy shield against the unseen. He'd followed Clara's instructions, buried the pouch, scattered the salt, but the hound had appeared anyway, closer, angrier. Her words echoed, might break the mark. Might not. Doubt nodded him as he peered through the blinds. Nothing, just pines swaying in the wind, the scorch marked by the mailbox glinting faintly under the porch light. He sank onto the couch, bourbon untouched, the rifle across his knees. Sleep was a stranger, his mind replaying the growl, the visions, fire, blood, his own end. Dawn crept in, gray and sluggish, and Jake dragged himself to the diner, coffee his only fuel. Ellie met his gaze, her face pale. "You see it again?" she asked, pouring without asking. He nodded, voice rough. "Crossroads last night. Did what Clara said buried some charm. Didn't work. It's pissed now." She winced, glancing at the door. "Pa tried salt too. Slowed it maybe, but not enough." "You talked to her again?" Jake shook his head. "Gonna. She's all I got." Old man Tucker overheard, hobbling over. "Black dog don't quit," he rasped, eyes bloodshot. Cousin salted his barn still crushed him. "You're marked, Mercer. Run if you can." Jake's jaw tightened. "Not yet," he said, though Lila's offer tugged at him. He paid and drove back to Clara's shack, the hills brooding under a clouded sky. She was outside, feeding chickens, her shotgun leaning against the porch. "Didn't work," Jake said, stepping out. Showed up right after, growled like thunder. Clara spat into the dirt, unfazed. "Stubborn bastard. Salt hold it off." He shrugged. Didn't come inside, but it was there close. She squinted at him, then beckoned him in, the herb scent thick as she rummaged through a trunk. "Fetch ain't just a dog," she said, pulling out a rusted iron cross. "It's a debt collector. Your kinno with something of blood, maybe? Grandma's brother." Jake frowned, piecing it together. "Drowned in 58. She saw it before and never said why he died." Clara handed him the cross, its edges sharp. "Water's a crossroads, 2 rivers, creeks. Might have crossed it wrong, promised something he didn't pay. Now it's on you." She lit a candle, wax dripping red. "Hang this over your door. Blood'll call it tonight, cut your hand, drip it at the crossroads. Force it to show." He took the cross, skeptical but desperate. "And if it don't like that?" Clara's eyes darkened. "Then you fight, boy. Or you die." Her certainty chilled him, but he nodded, pocketing the iron. Back at the trailer, he nailed it above the door, its weight creaking the frame. Work was a blur, the sawmill's din drowned by his pulse, coworkers' stares ignored. He called Lila, voice low. "If I don't call tomorrow, come get me." She protested, worried, but he hung up, resolute. Midnight loomed, and he drove to the crossroads, the iron cross cold against his chest, a hunting knife in hand. The air thickened, the moon a faint sliver, and he sliced his palm, wincing as blood welled. He let it drip onto the gravel, dark and glistening, whispering, "Show yourself." The ground rumbled, a growl splitting the silence, and the black dog emerged, huge, its fur rippling like smoke, eyes blazing hotter than before. It stepped closer, snout low, sniffing the blood. Jake gripped the knife, heart hammering. "What do you want?" he shouted. The hound's growl softened, a vision slamming into him, Grandma's brother, young, wading the creek, a bottle in hand, laughing as he tossed it in, a promise muttered, "Take me later, not now." The scene shifted, water rising, dragging him under, the hound watching from the bank. Jake staggered, the knife slipping. "He made a deal?" he gasped. The dog's eyes flared, and another vision hit. Jake, older, bleeding on the road, the debt unpaid. He swung the knife, wild, but the blade passed through air, the hound dissolving into shadow, then reforming, closer. Its growl was a command, pay or perish. Jake stumbled back, blood dripping, and ran for the truck, the cross thumping against his chest. The hound didn't chase, just watched, its eyes promising a reckoning. He locked himself in the trailer, salt refreshed, the vision's weight crushing him. His bloodline owed it a life, his, unless he broke the chain. Morning found him hollow, the diner's coffee bitter. Ellie saw his hand, bandaged and paled. "You fought it." He nodded, voice flat. "Showed me why Grandma's brother bargained with it. Wants me now." Her eyes widened. "Clara's gotta know more." "Don't give up, Jake." He agreed, the iron cross a talisman in his pocket, its edges biting his skin. The iron cross dug into Jake's palm as he gripped it, the trailer's thin walls trembling under a wind that carried the faint echo of a growl. He hadn't slept, the black dog's visions, his uncle's deal, his own blood on the road, looping through his mind. The hound had let him run last night, but its eyes promised it wasn't done. Salt lined the doors, the cross hung above, yet the air buzzed with menace, the clock ticking toward midnight like a countdown. Jake knew he couldn't wait, he had to face Clara, dig deeper, break this curse before it claimed him. Dawn broke cold and damp, the hills shrouded in mist as he drove to Hollow Road. Clara was on her porch, shotgun across her lap, her white hair wild in the breeze. She didn't look surprised when he stumbled out, bandage stained red from his cut hand. Back, huh? She rasped, eyeing the cross. What did it show you? Jake slumped into a chair, voice raw. My uncle, Grandma's brother. Made a deal by the creek, offered his life later. Dog took him, now wants me. Blood debt, you said? Clara nodded, slow and grim. Old spirits love a bargain. He cheated it. Lived longer than he should've. You're the payoff. She spat into the dirt, her eyes narrowing. Cross slow it down? Jake shrugged. Exhausted. Kept it out, maybe. Still came at the crossroads, close, pissed. Showed me dying. She leaned forward, sharp. Then you gotta settle it. Blood called it, blood'll end it. Not yours, though. He frowned, hope flickering. How? She stood, hobbling inside, and returned with a leather journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. Been reading, she said, flipping it open. Fetch like that. It's bound to the crossroads, but it's greedy. Takes more than it's owed sometimes. Your uncle's deal was one life, could have been paid. You trick it, offer something else. She tapped a passage, ink faded but legible. Blood of the line, freely given, or a proxy's end. Jake's pulse quickened. Proxy? Like what? Clara grinned, toothless and fierce. Something living, big enough to count. Hog, deer, dog if you're bold. Spill its blood at the crossroads, midnight. Say it's the debt. Might take it, might not. He stared, the idea brutal but possible. And if it don't? She shrugged. Then you're back to running, or fighting. He drove home, the journal heavy on the seat. Clara's words a lifeline and a gamble. Proxy, blood for blood. He had no hog, no deer handy, but the sawmill's woods teemed with game. He grabbed his rifle, a plan forming, reckless but desperate. At work, he clocked out early, co-workers' stares ignored, and hiked into the pines, the rifle slung over his shoulder. Dusk fell as he tracked. A buck, old and slow, its antlers gnarled. One shot, clean through the heart, and it dropped, blood pooling in the leaves. He dragged it to his truck, the weight straining his back, and drove to the crossroads, the buck's carcass thudding in the bed. Midnight neared, the air thick with that familiar dread. He parked, hauling the deer to the gravel, its blood dripping dark and wet. The iron cross hung around his neck, the knife in his hand. He sliced deeper, letting the blood soak the ground, and shouted, "Take this, debt's paid." The wind died, silence falling heavy, and the black dog appeared, huge, its eyes blazing, snout low over the offering. Jake stepped back, rifle raised, heart pounding. The hound sniffed the blood, its growl a rumble that shook the earth. A vision hit, his uncle laughing, the creek rising, then fading to the buck, still and red. The dog's eyes dimmed, just for a moment, and it paced, circling the carcass. Jake held his breath, praying Clara was right. The hound lunged. Not at him, but the deer, jaws snapping, tearing flesh with a sound like ripping cloth. Blood sprayed, the growl softening, and the dog fed, its form flickering like smoke. He didn't wait, bolted for the truck, slamming the gas. In the rear view, the hound shrank, eyes still on him, but it didn't chase. The cross burned hot against his chest, then cooled. Back home, he salted the doors, rifle ready, and collapsed, adrenaline fading to a shaky calm. Had it worked? The dog took the proxy. Did that settle it? Sleep came, fitful, dreams of blood and eyes. Morning brought no growl, no shadow. He drove to the diner, Ellie's relief palpable. "You're alive," she said, pouring coffee. "It gone?" He nodded, hesitant. "Think so. Fed it a deer, Crossroads last night. Took it, didn't follow." She exhaled, shaky. "Pod be proud. Clara knows her stuff." Tucker grunted from his stool. "Lucky Mercer. Hope it's full." But as Jake left, a chill hit him. The mailbox bore a new scorch mark, fresh and black. He froze, the calm shattering. The debt might have shifted, but the black dog wasn't done watching. The scorch mark by Jake's mailbox glowed faintly in the morning light, a jagged scar on the gravel that mocked his fragile hope. He'd fed the black dog a deer's blood, watched it tear into the proxy at the crossroads, felt the iron cross cool against his chest. Clara's trick had worked, or so he'd thought. But this mark, fresh and warm to the touch, whispered otherwise. The hound hadn't followed him home last night, hadn't growled through the walls, yet here was proof it hadn't left. Jake's stomach churned, the rifle in his hands a useless weight as he scanned the pines. Empty, silent, but watching. He drove to Clara's shack, the iron cross thumping against his ribs, the journal on the seat. She was splitting wood, her shotgun propped nearby, and didn't look up as he parked. Back again, she rasped, axe pausing. What now? Jake pointed to the cross, then the mark in his mind. Did the proxy, deer's blood at the crossroads. It took it, ate it, didn't chase me. But there's a burn by my place, new. It's still here. Clara set the axe down, wiping her brow, her eyes narrowing. Greedy bastard, she muttered, hobbling inside. Jake followed, the herb scent thick as she flipped through the journal, pages crackling. Proxy should have settled it, one life for one ode. Your uncle's debt was clear. She stopped, finger jabbing a line. Unless it's tasted you now, your blood from the cut. Might have bound you tighter, not loosed you. His hand flexed, the bandage stiff with dried blood from 2 nights back. I called it with that, he said, voice tight. You told me to. Clara nodded, grim. And it answered. Spirits like that, once they've got your scent, they don't let go easy. Deer might have fed it, but it wants the line, your kin's promise, your life. She rummaged in a drawer, pulling a vial of dark liquid oil, thick and pungent. Anoint the cross with this. Burn sage at your place. Might mask you, confuse it. He took the vial, doubt heavy. Might? That's all you got. Clara's gaze hardened. It's old, boy older in these hills. I ain't its master. You fight, you hide, or you pay. Choose fast, it's closing in. Jake pocketed the oil, the journal's weight a lifeline he clung to. What's it want, my death, or more? She shrugged, cryptic. Depends what it tastes. Fear's a feast too. Back at the trailer, he poured the oil over the cross, its scent sharp and bitter, and lit sage from the diner's stock, smoke curling thick. The scorch mark stayed, unyielding, and he salted the doors again, rifle by his side. Work was a blur, the sawmill's roar drowned by his pulse, coworkers' chatter distant. Ellie called, worried, news of his truck at the crossroads had spread. You okay? She asked. Barely, he admitted. It's not gone. Marked my place again. Her silence was heavy. Come stay with me, safer in town. He declined, stubborn. Gotta face it here. Midnight loomed and he stayed put, sage burning, the cross gleaming above the door. The clock hit 12 o'clock and the air thickened, a growl rumbling low outside. He grabbed the rifle, peering through the blinds. The black dog sat by the mailbox, closer than before, its eyes blazing, snout sniffing the air. The sage flickered, smoke thinning, and a vision slammed into him, his truck swerving, crashing into the mill, blades spinning red with his blood. He gasped, staggering, the rifle slipping. The hound rose, pacing slow, its growl a demand. Jake shouted, I paid you. Take it and go. The eyes flared, and the vision shifted. Grandma, old, whispering by the creek. Not my boy. Take another. Her voice a plea. Jake's knees buckled. She'd seen it too after her brother tried to shift the dead again. The hound's jaws parted, a snarl like thunder, and it lunged. Not at the door, but the window, glass shattering as smoke billowed out. Jake fired, the shot wild, passing through shadow as the dog reformed inside. He swung the rifle like a club, connecting with nothing, the hound circling, eyes promising ruin. What do you want? He yelled, voice breaking. It stopped, head tilting, and a new vision hit. Clara's shack, flames licking the roof, her silhouette trapped. Jake froze, the sage extinguished, the oil scent fading. Her, he whispered. The hound growled, low and final, then vanished, leaving a scorch on the floor. He drove to Clara's, heart pounding, the cross hot against his chest. Her shack stood quiet, no smoke, but the air buzzed with intent. He banged on the door, shouting, It's coming for you. She emerged, shotgun in hand, eyes wide. What did you do? She demanded. Showed me you, burning, he said, breathless. Thinks you're the debt now. Clara cursed, low and fierce. Meddling fool shifted it. We end this tonight or we're both done. The night pressed against Clara's shack like a living thing, the air thick with the scent of sage and the iron tang of fear. Jake stood on the porch, rifle in hand, the cross around his neck pulsing with faint heat as Clara loaded her shotgun with salt rounds. her movements sharp despite her age. The black dog had shifted its gaze, Clara burning in its vision, not him, and the realization hit hard. His meddling, his blood, had redirected the debt. "We end this tonight," she'd said, and now midnight loomed, the crossroads their battleground. "You sure about this?" Jake asked, voice rough, the vial of oil slick in his pocket. Clara's eyes glinted, fierce. "Sure as death. It's tasted us both now, won't stop till it's paid. We trick it, bind it, or die trying." She handed him a pouch, salt, herbs, a bone shard etched with runes. "Blood drew it, blood'll hold it. Cut yourself again, mix it with this, bury it deep at the crossroads. I'll call it force its hand." He nodded, dread coiling tight, but her resolve steadied him. They drove to County Road 12, the gravel crunching under Clara's old Jeep, the moon a thin crescent overhead. The crossroads waited, silent and heavy, the pines whispering in a wind that carried a faint growl. Jake stepped out, knife ready, and sliced his palm, wincing as blood welled, darker now, thicker. He mixed it with the pouch's contents, the runes glowing briefly, and dug, burying it where the roads met. Clara stood beside him, shotgun raised, chanting low, a guttural string of words he didn't know, old as the hills. The ground trembled, a growl splitting the night, and the black dog emerged, massive, its fur rippling like smoke, eyes blazing hotter than ever. It sniffed the blood, snout low, and its growl deepened, shaking Jake's bones. Clara stepped forward, voice rising. "Debt's here, fetch, take it, and be bound." The hound lunged, jaws snapping at the buried pouch, and Jake fired, the bullet passing through shadow as Clara's salt rounds hit, sparking against its form. It roared, staggering, but didn't dissolve, its eyes locked on them. A vision slammed Jake, Clara falling, blood pooling, then him, the trailer ablaze again. He shouted no and swung the cross, its iron edge cutting the air. The hound recoiled, snarling, and Clara tossed more salt, the grains sizzling on its hide. "It's weakening," she yelled, reloading. "Hold it." Jake grabbed the oil vial, smashing it at the crossroads, the liquid flaring as it hit the blood-soaked earth. The hound howled, a sound like breaking stone, and its form flickered, shrinking. He stabbed the knife into the ground, pinning the pouch, and the growl turned to a whine, the eyes dimming. Clara's chant peaked, words sharp and final, "By blood and bone, you're done. Stay where you're called." The hound lunged once more, weaker, and Jake swung the cross again, connecting this time, iron met shadow, a crack splitting the air. The dog collapsed, its form dissolving into the gravel, leaving a scorch mark that pulsed, then faded. Jake fell to his knees, panting, the cross cold now, the knife stuck fast. Clara leaned on her gun, breathless but alive. "Bound," she rasped, spitting into the dirt. "Not gone, tied to that spot. Debt's paid, boy." He looked at her, the weight lifting but not fully. "For good." She shrugged, grim. "Long as the blood holds. Don't dig it up." They drove back, silence heavy, the Jeep's rumble a lifeline to normalcy. At the trailer, no new scorch marks greeted him, the salt untouched. He salted the doors anyway, the cross hung above, a sentinel. Dawn broke and he slept, dreamless, the hound's eyes gone. At the diner, Ellie poured coffee, relief softening her face. "It's over?" she asked. "Think so," Jake said, the words tentative. Clara bound it, "Crossroads holds it now." Tucker grunted, skeptical. "Hope you're right, Mercer. Them things got long memories." Weeks passed, the growl of memory, the trailer quiet. Jake worked, ate, lived normal, almost. He called Lila, her voice bright. "Come visit," she urged, and he agreed, needing distance. But one night, driving County Road 12, he slowed at the crossroads, the knife still there, half buried, the scorch faint but real. A low whine hit his ears, not a growl, a plea, and his chest tightened. He sped off, the cross warm against his skin, a reminder. Back home, he locked the doors, sage burning, and checked the journal Clara had given him, its last page blank until now. Faint ink bloomed as he watched. It waits. He burned the book, ashes scattering, and moved to Knoxville, the hills behind him. The hound stayed bound, its eyes dimmed, but Jake felt it still, a shadow at the crossroads, watching, patient, its doom deferred but never dead.